Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm glad all of you are here today. Thank you. Um, to get our centering started today, I'd like you to stretch your hands way up in the air. Give yourselves, get your body, get your core a good stretch. Stretching way up, one and then the other. Okay, and wiggle your fingers and then bring them down to where you're looking at your hands at a relatively close distance. So you're, taking in some detail as I read this. Open your awareness to the your hand's journey through time. This was once a fin in the primordial seas of life where life began, just as it was again in your mother's womb in this lifetime. Countless adventures since have shaped it. This hand connected with tree and wind as it refined its intelligence. Your hands, the ancestors are in them. The ancestors who learned to push up on dry land, to climb, to reach, to grasp. The grasping hands of primates adapted to life in the trees. From there, then, to tool making and use, to chip rocks, to gather weeds and weave them into baskets, to gather seeds and harvest them and plant them again, to make fire and carry it along the long marches through the ages of ice. It's all in that hand from an unbroken succession of adventures. Similarly, your awareness to your hand's journey through your particular lifetime, ever since it came out of your mother's womb. Clever hands that have learned so much, learned to reach for breast or bottle, learned to tie shoelaces, learned to write and draw, learned to wipe tears. You know, there are people living now who believe that your hands are worthwhile and lovable because of what your hands have told them. There are people living now who will be healed in mind and body by the power that you allow your hand to flow through them. There are people living now whose last touch in life will come from your hands, and they will be able to go into their dying knowing that they are not abandoned. Take a good long look at your hands. They are a history book of where you've been, everything you've touched and worked for. Think of the handshakes that you've shared and pause for a moment to remember how those other hands felt. Some weak, some strong, some soft, some rush. Through their hands, you felt some of the other person's character and even the kind of work they have done. Your hands are not only strong and capable, they are also filled with love and beauty. So how we have come to this place in time, all of our stories told through our hands, through our being, the way that we show up in places. And so how do we tell those stories? How do we appreciate those stories in ourselves? How do we appreciate the stories of those who have come before us and those who will come after us? So going back to this is where we ended on Wednesday, thinking about um, the relationship of people and trees and looking at these images. What comes up for you? You can talk to your neighbor about it, and then I'd love to hear from a couple of folks. Who would like to say something? What does this bring up for you? Have you hugged trees? Have you not hugged trees? Hi, Ashton. Mhm. Yeah. So that it was made to happen, that our arms are built for this. I mentioned that in one of our first classes that we are the human species that survived because of our ability and willingness to collaborate and to communicate and to connect, right? We weren't the most warring, the strongest of the human species, but we were the ones that were made for connection. And so hugging is a very natural thing. So I appreciate that you bring that up. We talked about it with other people, but how it seems pretty natural to do it this way as well. Thank you. Other thoughts about this? Thanks, Mallory.
It reminded me of when I was little. I was a big tree climber. Like whenever I was at my older siblings' soccer games or anything, I'd always just try to go find a good tree to climb, and that's just what these pictures reminded me of.
Sweet. Do you still climb trees?
I have not, but I did hug a tree last semester. I went to the Japanese forest bathing they offered, and
Hmm.
we had to hug a tree for one of the invitations.
How was that for you?
It was pretty cool. It like reminded me of when I would climb trees when I was little, and we just had to sit with the tree for about like 15 minutes and just try to resonate with it and learn from it.
hmm Thanks for offering that. I am still an avid tree climber. There is a lot to be said for sharing time in those branches, right? And the challenge, the physical challenge of it. And so it's challenging. We live, we work, we are walking around this campus that have a lot of really good climbing trees. So I have enjoyed doing that here as well as in other places. I have a fabulous maple tree in my neighborhood that's one of my peaceful places to go is to climb up in that tree and watch the sunset. Sometimes with my kids and sometimes without, just as a peaceful time for me. So connection with trees. And so after all we've been through, right, all of this evolution, coevolution over time, we have so much in common. So where are we now is a really interesting question to think about where this relationship is and how we feel about the relationship, but then also where is the relationship going that we don't yet know. There's a lot of interesting story and wondering just is your relationship with plants, trees fulfilling? And how is it that you choose that? How is it that you nurture that relationship, those relationships, if you so choose to do so? So today we are going to continue kind of this theme of building relationship and thinking about that fabulous tree of life, right? Again, intentionally small because it is so vast to think about all of these connections. So take a moment and consider for yourself, just jot in your journal, is there some other being on this tree of life with whom you struggle to connect? With whom do you struggle to connect? So, any species of plant or animal or whatever that looks like for you, any person or group of people, thinking about where do you struggle to connect? Where is it relationship challenging for you? So, take just a moment and jot that in your journal. Does anyone feel compelled to speak about that at this moment?
I have trouble connecting with like insects or mainly like worms and stuff like that because I don't know, they kind of like weird me out sometimes. Or I think it's just like growing up, you would see a spider, and you don't want to like deal with it.
Mhm.
And yeah, I just find that hard to kind of relate to that.
Yeah, they're so different than us, right? Thank you for saying that. It's just a very different way of being in the world. We have somebody else up here, Mallory, closer up to the front. Will you raise your hand again for her? Thank you.
I said dinosaurs
Dinosaurs.
because we didn't live in their time.
We didn't, right? We didn't share time with them. And so that relationship feels very far away, very strained, very hard to imagine. But then we have on our planet now the things that the animals that evolved or came from them, the crocodiles, the turtles, all of these ancient species. In fact, we're going to be talking about one of those in just a moment. So remember the concept of Umwelt, the idea that we experience the world as individuals, each of us, but then each of those animals. How does a worm experience the world, right? How does a spider experience the world? And doing our best, we are gifted with these pretty cool imaginations and curiosity that can help us with this connection, how we can build those connections. So as we go through a few different organisms, thinking about what their life must be like, seeing how far you can go into your imagination to put yourself in the place of these creatures. So we're going to set the scene of a gathering of all species. There are representatives from all species on the planet in this circle, like a council. And so the conversation comes up in this council of who is best, what species is best. So here we are, right? The green life. This is what we talked about the other day. Are plants the best? If you think about all of those characteristics that we talked about last Wednesday, that they snag light, right? And make it into food, snagging light that's going 186,000 miles per second. They grab that, they take it into their being, they make their own food. That's pretty great. They are the base of all the food chains on the planet. That's pretty great, right? So maybe the green life, maybe they are the best in this planet, right? Did anybody have an encounter with someone from the green life since we had our class last Wednesday? Have different kind of looking at your house plants in a different way, right? Understand, or the banana that you were eating, knowing that we share 60% of our DNA with them. So that might be an opportunity for you at some point. Just thinking about how to build those relationships, how to shape those encounters a little bit more. So, what about those worms, right? What about those worms that are doing all kinds of crazy things that we don't see them doing, that we don't understand what they're doing? Their lives are so vastly different than ours. They might seem kind of gross even, right? But all of their features are important to the way that they live their lives. Oh, but they're so slimy. Of course they're slimy because they're crawling through the dirt. If they were dry, they would just simply dry out. They wouldn't be able to breathe. So they have to be slimy to do the things that they do in their lives, right? The mucus helps them move through that soil, and it's also helping them to take in oxygen from the world around them, lets them let go of the carbon dioxide as they do their gas exchange. So very different than we do. If they are out in the sun too long, they dry up. That slime does dry up, and then they die because they can't do the gas exchange that they need to. They can't breathe. And yet, they play this really crucial role in the ecosystems, the food chains. So when plants and animals die, they eat that stuff, right? They're taking in those nutrients and then pooping it out in a form that can be used by plants to take up. So as great as those plants are, they wouldn't survive without decomposers like worms. So maybe decomposers are the best, right? They're recycling the dead stuff, putting it back into the soil so that other animals could use it, returning all those nutrients back, keeping those food chains going. So that's pretty important. Thinking about how important composting is, that Penn State puts a lot of energy into composting. Everywhere on campus, there are compost bins for your leftover food. If you happen to have leftover food, that all goes back to get cycled and nutrients and be exposed to these decomposers that are then going to come back to campus when the soil is done, comes back here, and it grows all of the beautiful plants, all of the beautiful flowers that Penn State plants here are nourished by your leftovers. So that's pretty important, but it wouldn't happen without these decomposers. So maybe they're the most important on the planet. Maybe they're the best. But then there's this, right? Has anybody encountered these at the beach before? Some of you, yeah. Horseshoe crabs. Maybe horseshoe crabs are the best. So I vacationed with my kids in early June to the coast of Delaware. I had no idea what was happening there at that time of year, right? Thousands upon thousands of these creatures, horseshoe crabs, were coming up onto the beach to mate. And then they would go back out. They would lay their eggs on the shore, and then they would go back out to the sea. And so this was happening through our entire vacation. It was actually hard to be at the beach because there were so many horseshoe crabs. It was this phenomenon, this natural phenomenon, absolutely beautiful. The seabirds that come and feast on the eggs, it's this whole cycle. It's this magic that's happening in the natural world. So the marine and brackish water arthropods, they're closely related mostly to spiders and to ticks and to scorpions. They aren't actually crabs, they are crustaceans. So their origin is 450 million years ago, actually predating those dinosaurs. Right? So long time ago, 450 million years, they have been on this planet compared to our 200, 300,000 years that we've been here. So the things that they have survived, the changes that they've seen on this planet are pretty remarkable. 450 million years they've been around. So maybe horseshoe crabs are the best. It's interesting to think about what their lives are like. What about owls? Owls, the owl life? Oh my gosh, I think it would be so exciting to be an owl. Right? Thinking about what this must be like to have those eyes that can see 5 times better than ours at night, to have hearing that is remarkably better than ours, the senses that they have to take in the world and do the things that they can do, flying silently at night with their super soft feathers. Their lives are pretty unique as well. What would it be like to be an owl? And these predators are so important on planet Earth. If there were not predators, then rodents would take over because rodents are so successful. They breed so fast, and there can be so many of them. So without these predators, owls and snakes and foxes and bobcats, all of those kinds of predators, rodents would have a heyday. And so they play a really important part in all of these relationships and cycles. Maybe predators are the best. It's hard to say. I do like thinking about what it's like to be each of these creatures. What about this? Bacteria. What the heck? Are bacteria the best? Who knows? Like thinking about bacteria as a group, bacteria have a remarkable repertoire of capabilities. Bacteria can swim like animals, photosynthesize like plants, decompose dead organic matter like fungi. They have pioneered into existence all of life's essential metabolic processes: photosynthesis, oxygen breathing, fermentation, nitrogen fixation, all of these very essential things to life on planet Earth. Biologists now estimate that Earth might house as many as 1 trillion distinct species of microbes. So they've been maintaining this vast global network, right? And so the answer to the question, what is life? That answer might be bacteria because of all the things that they've done for us. So maybe bacteria are the best? Here's one example. I alluded to this earlier in the semester. This is a photo of bacteria that are living in our mouths right now. 300 different species of bacteria that are living in your mouth right now. So even when you brushed your teeth this morning, they're still there, right? Even if you use mouthwash, they're still there. And this is really actually important. The microscopy expert that took swabs from inside his own mouth and put them under the scanning electron microscope, he dyed them different colors so he could see the different species under the microscope. And so while some bacteria can cause gum disease and tooth decay, there are others that are really essential for our health. He showed that some species are especially adapted to live at the back of your tongue, and some are specialized to live in your cheeks, and some others prefer and feed on the plaque that is on our teeth. So all of these are beneficial, helping us to keep healthy, right? And even this only scratches the surface of what's going on in our own bodies. If you count all of the cells that are in our bodies, estimated between 30 and 40 trillion, then tally up all of the microbes that live in your body, those microbes outnumber the number of cells in our bodies that is human. I'll say that again. So the microbe cells, the things that are not human, that live inside of me and inside of you, there's more of them than there are human cells inside of me. So DNA that resides in our bodies and, creates all these important processes that make me, me, and you, there is this fact that there's more microbe DNA inside of me than human DNA. 3 to 5 pounds of bacteria in our digestive tracts, 1 billion species per centimeter, or 1 billion, individuals per centimeter on our skin, 20 billion organisms in our mouths. So we are not alone ever thinking about in our bodies what's going on. It's not a multitude of species just out there. It's a multitude of species right in here, inside of me, a swirling, pulsating ecosystem of beings within each of our bodies. And right now they're all around you. So when you wash your hands, they're still there. When you pick up your phone, they're on there. Everything you touch, you're sharing and moving them all the time. And we are conditioned to see bacteria as enemies, and yet, is that always true? How is it with you? How do you feel about bacteria? Why don't you talk to your neighbor about that for a moment? Does anyone care to say anything about that at the moment?
I never think of bacteria as enemy. Sometimes I think that bacteria is useful, especially bacteria that is naturally occurring in foods,
Mhm.
which many people disagree with. But I think that bacteria in food, the good of it helps you in digesting the food itself.
Yes, well said. Thank you. Can you, for those who don't think about it very often, could you give an example or two of food that has bacteria?
Yeah. One of the foods that I drink that contains bioactive bacteria is milk, especially if you drink it straight from the udder. That contains bacteria that is useful in digesting it, which I did growing up, and I never had any problems.
Yeah, thank you for saying so. So milk and yogurt, right? Active bacteria. Thank you for using that as an example. Anybody else have something you'd like to say about bacteria? The raw milk, I believe that you can get it at the farmer's market sometimes. You'd like to do some research about that.
I think something very interesting is that in one of my bio classes, they said that as soon as we're born from cesarean or normally, we are filled with bacteria that ends up living with us for the rest of our lives.
Mhm.
And with that, it helps us digest food, keep our mouth clean, all of that.
Yeah. So what gets passed on from mother to baby through those processes is all very natural. Yes. Sweet. Thank you for sharing that. So these bacteria, right, they might actually be friends. If we shift our perspective of bacteria are enemies, which is much of the social norm, I believe, and belief of these days, to what bacteria can actually be helping us along the way. There are two beautiful examples. Um, Also, there's this idea that studies provide the evidence that the composition of our gut microbiota, that means all of those other beings that are living in our guts, help to shape our moods. So if we have a healthy gut biome means living inside of there, it could influence. So almost all of our serotonin and much of our dopamine, those are the neurotransmitters that we've talked about a number of times. Those are associated with pleasure and well-being, those kinds of feelings. And those things are produced by microbes that reside in our guts. So if we have those healthy microbiota, then we are going to have higher amounts of those important neurotransmitters that actually help us to feel good, to feel healthy, to feel happy. So this gut bacteria have this power to change our mood, right? So there were some researchers at McMaster University that they took these mice that were more bold and outgoing, And they took some of the microbiota, the things that are living inside of those mice guts, and they transferred those microbiota over to these mice that were more shy and timid. And what happened was the shy and timid mice suddenly came out of their shells and they started being a little more active, a little bit more outgoing. And so showing that that microbiota, that what is happening inside the gut can really influence us. So when you're choosing foods that are healthy for you, thinking about things that are going to nourish your system, including those items that might contain bacteria, but then also nourishing the bacteria that are already in there. So I know that that's an example that they're just mice, except over and over, it's shown that the research that's done on mammals, these small mammals, proves to be true in humans as well. So there's lots of power and capability for bacteria. So maybe they are the best. So when we go back to the idea of dualism from, I think this was our third class of the semester, the idea of dualism of superior and inferior, this becomes a little bit trickier. Why don't you talk to your neighbor about this? See what you think. I know that some of you were particularly wrestling when we first did this exercise with human and tree, superior, inferior. Does anybody want to say anything going back to that, coming to this point now, or anything else that you'd like to bring up related to this?
One thing I always think about when we first saw this list too is that like humans in general, when you look at everything else on the list, like we kind of went over some examples of how those other things provide for us or provide or take care of Earth. And obviously like one big thing about humans is like we don't really take care of the Earth. So I'm not saying one's either superior or inferior, but definitely the ones on the right side at least have some obvious benefits towards the
Mm.
natural world.
Thank you, Soren. Yeah.
Something that came up for me was like, what is, I feel like it depends on your definition of superior. Like, you could have, like, I feel like there's a very like human definition, which is more powerful, has more control, what like takes the forefront. But I feel like that order, like, you could really put those things in any order depending on what you think is superior or like inferior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the definitions themselves. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Are you going that way, Mallory? Okay, great. Then yes, you're doing great.
I just want to say I think that humans are superior because I think consciously because of the society that we have developed, we have the most free will because we are now like the most developed beings. Like I think a quote I like from John Stuart Mill is I'd rather be a dissatisfied human than a satisfied pig because, you're aware of your surroundings, like the sense of consciousness we have and what's going on and the complexity we have as humans rather than any other species, I think in that sense makes us superior. And I think, yeah, that's just my opinion.
Thank you. So where does consciousness come into this, and what defines consciousness actually is?
I agree with that completely. I was gonna say kind of around the same thing where I think the fact that we have like a built society where like obviously all creatures can communicate and talk to each other, but humans have created like so many different languages and so many different cultures and societies to where like the fact that we have all of that, I think just makes us like, at least for me, like see us as superior to some of these other things on the lists.
Interesting. Yeah.
Um, I thought that those were two very interesting perspectives. When in my conversation, we were comparing humans and owls, and my partner did mention that, humans can like have built their own society and like the way that we have come about our lifestyle. But I think that things like owls, or really any of those, even crabs and worms, they have also built their own societies. They are just not up to the same possible standard that maybe humans are up to. Like, they don't need to use technology to get through and to survive, they just survive. But we need all these extra things to survive, so keep that in mind.
Anyone else? There's someone over here, Mallory. Just step the sides.
I feel that we depend on a lot of those things. We depend on trees for shelter, the wood that comes from those trees, worms. They feed the fish and the animals that we eat. Um, Crabs, different animals that are in nature, we have to depend on to eat. So I think it's more of a symbiotic relationship than inferior or superior, because without them, then there wouldn't be us.
Interesting. Yeah, it's quite a debate, isn't it? It's quite like a mind wrestling around this, because it seems as though we've been really shaped, our culture has shaped us to think one thing, and there are all these other dynamics that as we become aware of them, it might help us to reframe, pardon me, it might help us to reframe or think about things in a different way, that we might need to think about for years as we wrestle with these kinds of questions. Dr. Lewis Thomas says there's no solitary free living creature. Every form on life is dependent on other forms. So that being true inside of our own bodies, as well as what you just said, as far as all of these connections, all of these other things that we need, that we would not exist without them. So how is it that we can say that we are superior when we depend on all of these other living species, other living beings to be where we are in this place today? So how is it, right? If we think about instead the totality of species, as well as the totality of individuals, the vast range of life strategies that these animals are using, that these beings are using. And when I say these animals and these beings, I'm including us in that, right? In that tree of life, no bud and no branch is better than another. It's this whole complete system where things rely on other things. We're all made of the same stuff. We are all unfolding in our unique ways. And so it's not that we are separate from, we are a part of, right? A part of all of these things. We have to be in relationship with all these other things to understand our place, our connection. So how can we then represent or understand these other beings and our place amongst them? So part of that is the umwelt that I've referred to a couple of times. How can we see those other species and other beings and how they live in community with one another, but then how they're part of the larger community of life? How can we see those sensitivities, those special things that other species have that we don't see, that we can't understand without really taking a moment to slow down? And then even then, those communities, what is a community of owls like? What's a community of horseshoe crabs like? Well, that's really tricky because they have their own ways of being that are so different than ours. And understanding that flourishing is more about, it's much more about IQ. It's not just IQ, I should say. There's emotional and social and intuitive intelligences, and that's true in this room, on this campus, in this town, whatever place, right? This unique group of people holds a number of different capacities and capabilities. The idea that we aren't all the same, that we all have unique sensitivities as well. Some of you are very tuned into music. Some of you are tuned into reading other languages and are gifted at that. Could be sign language, could be number patterns, could be bird song, could be the power of touch, right? Everybody in this room. So when we think about this umwelt, thinking about what it's like to live in your body, it's different than living in my body because we are different people, and how beautiful that is. And then when we extend that to other species, imagining what their lives are like, understanding their full intelligences, their sensitivities. What we're going through here is this idea when we look outside the box, an ism means it's a belief system, racism, speciesism, sexism. So these are our ways of thinking, the ways of practicing life, philosophies, right? Political ideologies. And so today what we're talking about is speciesism, the idea that because non-human animals are not human, their interest in their lives matters less than our interest in our lives. So how is it that we can open to an awareness rather than separating us from relationship? So thinking outside of our box. So some people argue that speciesism or racism, sexism is natural because we are most attracted to the things that are like us. It's more natural to treat our own favorably, except that many of you have just pointed out that we have the choice, right? We have these societies, we have these capabilities, we have this intelligence that we can think outside of that and open our awareness to other possibilities. So yes, foxes might hang out with other foxes rather than with raccoons, and that makes complete sense because fox is what they know. But we, as humans, have this capacity, as many of you pointed out, for expanding our awareness. So if we stick within our human bias, then that separates us from relationship. It leaves out entire groups of beings and possibilities. And so what I'm asking you to consider is respect and attempts at understanding and connection, putting yourself in their place to the best of your ability. So going back to that question I asked you at the beginning of class, the things that you feel separate from, the things that you have trouble making connection with, spiders and insects and worms. For me, it's ticks. I really struggle. I don't quite understand. It's hard to imagine, hard for me to put myself in the place of a tick and understand their way of being. And so how is it that you can look at those places where you feel the challenge, the disconnect, and find some kind of appreciation for their uniqueness. How does that species fit into that web of life? What do you actually have in common with that species? So what we're working on is moving from ego, where humans are at the top and all these other things, other beautiful beings are below us. Ego in psychology, the ego is the conscious part of the personality that interacts with the world. Our ego sometimes speaks up, right? And needs or demands certain things. It's the part of the mind that plans and evaluates. It's the part that is the I, the expression. And it holds on to our beliefs in certain ways. So what we're doing today is thinking more about eco. How is it that without any of these species, the world that we experience would not be the same, including how we ourselves are part of this larger system of life, right? So Alexander von Humboldt, he was an 18th century scientist and explorer. He was world famous in his time. Alexander von Humboldt. He was the first to explain the fundamental functions of the forest, ecosystem, and climate, understanding that rainforests make their own climate, that things that fit together in the ocean paradigm are all working together. So this is the concept that we now think of as nature, right? How nature all fits together to create this unique way of our planet. The idea that everything from the largest to the smallest creature has its role and together makes the whole, creates the way the world works in the togetherness of that. So we are all made of the same stuff. We are all interacting and fitting together, and all the parts are necessary, whether we're thinking about individuals or whether we're thinking about species. It's this totality, right? The complete picture, all of the sensitivities that contributes to the magnificence of life. So how is it that you can go back to your beginning species and reflect on that? My awareness of the individuality of all beings transforms the world into a universe filled with opportunities to develop personal relationships of all kinds. From Barbara Smuts, she's a primatologist. So your discussion question this week will relate to this. The more of the world I am in relationship, the more alive I become. So to reflect on that, and I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday. Thank you. Thank you, Scout. It's sometimes just nice having somebody else up here. Thank you. I don't feel quite as alone. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I really like that. You, of course.